believe that the vast majority of South Africans were very angry when they read and heard about the racist tweets of Jessica dos Santos and Sidi Tamana. The tweets and many people's responses have trended and retrended over the last few days, online and in the media. They have been the subject of news reports and of political satire. They have led to some intense and heart-rending introspection, and rightly so. But what they must not be allowed to do is to paralyze us. Nor can they divert attention from the cause of reconciliation in South Africa. The racist remarks of both women offended because they dealt a blow against this country's proudest achievement. An achievement which former President Nelson Mandela expressed in his inaugural declaration that never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another. As a nation, we have to accept that remarks like these are not one-off exceptions. The fact is that they reflect the deep complexities of what race means in South Africa and to South Africans today. Yesterday, after all, is not another country. We cannot wish the potency of race away or of racism any more than we can wish away the very divisive history of our country. As a young leader, I had to face some very tough realities when I read these young women's tweets on the internet. They were not made by people who grew up under apartheid, or even in the turbulent transition period that succeeded the 1994 elections. They were made by two young South Africans 18 years after our first democratic election. One might have thought that these two young people were part and parcel of a newly emerging non-racial society which is free of bigotry and racism. My own initial response after reading Jessica's tweet was one of anger, both at the words that she had used and at the public platform on which she had chosen to use them. I felt anger that she was able to express these kinds of sentiments and use these kinds of words, apparently with impunity. And then I realized that my initial anger was wrong, even though it was a very human response. My anger was stirred by 1,000 slights that will be familiar to many other Black South Africans, both in this room and outside of it. More often in life, it is the indiscernible and the unspoken slight that troubles us the most. I have experienced the haughty tone in a store, the icy stare, the unspoken insinuation that I might not have quite grasped the point, the patronizing put down, often, I believe, because I am Black. Some of these are so oblique and so subtle as to be invisible, and sometimes, friends, they have absolutely nothing to do with race. Yet their effect over time is to construct a worldview in which one constantly feels paranoid that somebody is out to get one. The other sad reality is that there are some who would have silently agreed with Jessica and Siri's online remarks. Perhaps their silence and their silent anger is even more lethal because it is internalized. It seems to me that many people's anger in this country, on both sides of the racial divide, has intensified and not abated as we had hoped it would. As citizens, we cannot afford to let this hatred simmer. We know that we are stronger when we stand together, not when we are divided. It is each of our responsibility, no matter who we are or where we are, to take a firm stand at all times and in all places against racism. Friends, it would be naive to believe that racism can be eliminated in 18 short years, in one generation even. For many Black South Africans, the challenge remains to overcome the burdens of the past without becoming embittered by memories of its many, many injustices. And for many white South Africans, the challenge is to acknowledge that racism does not just exist in the minds of some Black South Africans, that it is a real and debilitating fact of life in South Africa today. However, I do want to make one thing very clear. By condemning racism, by saying it is wrong, I don't seek to give race a meaning that it doesn't deserve. The concept of race is a fiction that has been mobilized and twisted and abused by political and ethnic despots for generations. Even Adolf Hitler knew this, despite elevating race as a central concept of his own political agenda. His own words on this subject are chilling, and I quote, "I know perfectly well that in a scientific sense, there is no such thing as race. But I, as a politician, need a concept which has hitherto existed on historical bases to be abolished, and an entirely new and anti-historical order enforced and given an intellectual basis. And for this purpose, the concept of race serves me well." End of quote. Race has also served apartheid's architects, so well in fact that we live with its consequences even today. My party, the Democratic Alliance, has, like all people who care about South Africa, been carefully considering the full meaning and the measure of reconciliation in our country. We define reconciliation as the process which brings together South Africans who have been divided by a history of discrimination and of oppression. The Constitution enjoins South Africans to recognize the injustices of the past and to heal the divisions of the past. The importance of the first part cannot be overstated. Reconciliation requires an acknowledgement that apartheid was wrong, that it caused incalculable emotional pain and incalculable material deprivation. Reconciliation informs us that every South African is a full and a legitimate part of our beautiful new country and our new democracy. In 1994, the pain and the divisions were so very deep on both sides of the racial divide that only a national process of truth and reconciliation could begin to bind our country's wounds. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established with the need to tell truthful narratives about apartheid and a push to forgive those who did wrong under the old order. I think we need to rediscover that spirit and the model of reconciliation on which it was built. We have lost the momentum that Mandela once gave to us. As political leaders too, we must take some responsibility for the mood of our country, which has lost the hope of the initial Mandela years. The decline of civility and dignified engagement in our politics means that often social solidarity between different people has been replaced by anger and defensiveness. Various groups will circle around their wagons, around identity, concepts of race, ethnicity, language, and religion. I believe that the only way we will ever be able to build one united nation is if each and every community in our country, be it formed upon political or racial or ethnic or religious or any other lines, makes the defense of the rights of other communities part of its daily activity. This work, I believe, must continue with you. On your way to campus in the morning, in the classroom, at the petrol station, in the mosque, at church, at the gym, in every encounter of your daily lives. Only reconciliation and redress will free us from the fear and the angst which currently grip us. Reconciliation is a matter of the individual's heart and soul, as much as it is a national endeavor. And reconciliation is toothless without its attendant process, the process of redress. Because the reality is that the legacy of racial discrimination is real, and it does still have to be addressed, not just with words, but also with deeds. Black South Africans, and when I say Black South Africans, I refer to all South Africans of colour, were subject to a ruthless form of asset stripping and restrictions. They were subjected to labour laws that prevented their advancement, to land expropriation, to business regulations that banned black ownership, to the sin of Bantu education, and to laws that kept black South Africans from living in the metropolitan areas, thus preventing them from enjoying the economic benefits of home ownership there. Putting right the wrongs of the past past requires a number of strategic interventions, like broad-based BEE, for example, for a period of time. Again, like reconciliation, these interventions are imperfect, but they are necessary. However, none of these interventions will be successful if we do not settle on an understanding that one group of people's dreams does not come at the expense of another group of people's dreams. Every one of us must find a home in South Africa. We all have a stake in this beautiful country. We must all come to the understanding that being united in our diversity makes us stronger. Reconciliation means binding together our particular grievances, be they for better schools, better jobs, better healthcare, to the larger destiny of South Africans. We will know reconciliation and redress are working when we start to see ourselves reflected in one another. We know that this work is far from done because Jessica and Siri did not see themselves reflected in the eyes of those that they tweeted so viciously about. I hope each of them loves what Nelson Mandela stands for. I hope that each of them would choose love over hate. We must give them hope that unity is our only future, not division. That is why I believe sensitivity is so important when we choose our words, when we speak to each other, and when we frame and deploy our thoughts and our arguments. Our words and our thoughts, if we do not watch them, become actions that we soon regret. The act of reconciliation moves us to embrace Jessica and Siri with love. These two young women are a part of our country, and their lives must go on as well. Our worst response would be to reject them. I have chosen not to give up on them, and neither should you. Finally, reconciliation also requires openness to the experience of those who do not share one's own history and perspective, to see with open eyes. Empathy is much more than just sympathy. Empathy as a fruit of reconciliation entails a willingness to embrace diversity, a society whose members respect the intrinsic value of the individual and the rights of people who are different from themselves. The way to build a strong, diverse society is not to make everyone the same. The challenge is not to make them more like us. The challenge is to build an entirely new us. So each one of you today, as the next generation of South Africa's leaders, has an important task ahead of you: to bear Nelson Mandela's torch of reconciliation. Do it with pride. Be part of the generation of South Africans who build a united South Africa in which racism has absolutely no place. And remember, we are all stronger together. Thank you.